So now, yes, we extend a warm welcome to Dr. Sarup Mathur. We thank her so much for being with us today and for taking time to join us for this series. Thank you so much, Sarup. Welcome you.
Thank you for such a warm welcome. Thank you for taking out this chunk of time on a Saturday morning or afternoon, wherever you are. I don't know the time difference, so I just welcome you all to this session. I'm pretty sure you had other things to do, so I really respect your time, and let's just make it very lively discussion about such an important topic. Thanks to Dr. Paula Crowley and Bev Johns for including me in this wonderful series of presentations. I had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Gerber, who reminded us of the unique contributions of Elizabeth Farrell and her background that prepared her to be the voice of students with disabilities. She was one of the founders of the Council for Exceptional Children and its first president. And later I heard Dr. Kaufman, who talked about inclusion and the importance of appropriate instruction rather than location or placement. And today we're going to talk about this important concept of collaboration and resulting professional learning from it. So we're going to dwell into this topic, and I'm going to ask if I can share my screen. Can we all see the slideshow here?
We're seeing right now Dr. Crowley's screen. So she will need to stop share.
I will need to stop share?
Yes, because we're seeing, there we go. Excellent. There we go. There we go. Now we can see it perfect.
Excellent, Sarup. We can see your screen.
Okay, wonderful. So I just want to start off with my personal journey in this profession and how in the process of socialization, I became part of several professional collaborative structures, groups such as CCBD, TECBD, CEC, that have provided me with safe spaces to share and discuss and expand upon ideas, my ideas, other people's ideas, and helped me grow professionally. And I just have to say that my professional identity has been very much supported by these collaborative structures. And it has yielded sometimes directly and sometimes vicariously professional learning. And I've just, those exchanges have been very, very beneficial and satisfying. So when we look at our field, you know, collaboration is not a new thing for us. We have a long history of collaboration in our field. As special educators, we have worked with paraprofessionals, general educators, parents, school psychologists, mental health professionals. So we really know collaboration. It was always part of our preparation. However, these collaborative structures and partnerships were sort of confined to the field of special ed. And in late 80s and early 90s, when we started to witness this emphasis on inclusion, we also noticed interest in co-teaching, and it got intensified with that. And there was this, with all these changes surrounding us, there was a significant increase and some associated common sense value that was attached to collaboration. So it became you didn't have to have evidence. Nobody could say collaboration is a bad idea. It was really viewed as something important at that time. And we also noticed as research was being done more so on expert guidance, co-teaching, teacher performance feedback in more later decade or so, we noticed that when those kind of practices were aligned with students' special needs, there were greater outcomes for all students. So that was also sort of leading us our way through this process of learning more about collaboration. So what is it? And let's just sort of talk about what it is and how it helps in our learning process. And we're talking about collaboration as it is structured in a systematic process. When we create professional learning communities where collaboration becomes an essential element, one of the elements. And as the name implies, it starts with co-laboring. It's working together for a collective purpose. And that collective purpose is extremely important. And sometimes it's very difficult to approach that. It's easier said than done, particularly when we all come from various perspectives. And to create a culture of learning where all the voices can be heard, and it's a collaborative culture that sort of gives us the sense of having some deeper levels of learning. And we all can interact together, even though we have diverse expertise, diverse perspectives, but we're coming towards a mutually defined goal or trying to address a mutually defined problem. In some, literature, we have also now seen this word, and I'm pretty sure you've heard it too, the third space, which is more like creating more opportunities for communal learning, leaving your systems and organizations at one place. Maybe let's just have a simple example of family structures, and then workspace, which is your school structure, and then going to this communal learning environment and space where you bring these ideas together and try to create opportunities of learning from each other, which is more like a horizontal learning, not a vertical learning coming from one place where knowledge is considered to be a product which is passed on from one person to another person. It is more of an exchange of ideas where we can create ideas, co-create ideas, refine ideas, and so forth. So I just wanted to give us a perspective here about where we are in this systematic process where we work together to analyze our own professional practice, which is then beneficial for myself who is involved in this experience and for others, as well, who are participating in this. So then the next question comes, why should we even think about it? Of course, special educators have been ahead in this game, so we have to give ourselves some credit here. Because now we recognize that there is a lot of complexity around our problems. And so when we collaborate, we're able to solve problems. And oftentimes we feel like, we are all working in some kind of a matrix organization where we don't know what is the other piece doing. So it becomes important that people within our organizations are coming together and they understand what the other departments, the other programs, are actually doing. And there are some ways addressing some parts of the problem that we're trying to address. And then we learn from their perspectives. And we discover how there are different ways to communicate about things. Because every single day, I notice that if there is a meaningful interaction that happens in a group, I come back and say, oh, I learned about this part. Maybe I should do this differently next time. So there is always that new channel of communication that emerges in that. And I feel very good about that. I can share one of the examples. I was working with a rural county, Pima, which is about 150 miles away from metropolitan Phoenix area. And I was actually going and visiting these detention facilities over there. And it was, for me, this was more of an experience of learning. I just wanted to see how they were doing their business. And they invited me to this stakeholders group meeting, which they usually organized once in 2 or 3 months. And I just wanted to go witness that. So I drove there, and my area of work has been in recent years inclusive of kids who have been in secure care facilities and detention facilities. And so I have been working in those settings. So I thought it was very interesting. I should go and see how they do their collaborative structures and how they process information and what kind of learning emerges from those kind of things. So I went there, and to my surprise, I noticed how careful they were in creating their groups. They had business organizations that were representing that group. They had Superior Court judge who was coming, not necessarily every single, for every single meeting, but on that day he was there. We had superintendent of the Unified School District, and we had community college. We have detention manager there, and we have other community organizations that were serving youth in their community. So there was a good representation of about 8 to 10 members who were participating in that dialogue. And what I saw there, I'm just giving you an example because I was going cold feet trying to see what it looks like. And I saw that they shared a dashboard that they had created recently, which was indicating how the detention staff was working with some students who were there for short term, for at least 30 days. And they were looking at the work that their student had to do and how there was some communication from the teachers of the Unified School District that was being displayed, indicating the work that the student needed to complete, when that student was actually in detention. And for me, this was something I said, I have been talking about streamlining this process of communication between these agencies, and look at what they have here in this small county, a rural county, this commonsensical approach of putting together these people, creating this technology-based dashboard where this communication is already happening. I could see that the student had to do some kind of a report, and then which staff from the detention was actually designated to help the student complete that work. So when the student was released, there was no time lapse in between, and the student was not struggling with credit recovery issues of any sort, could go back to that place and then start in that high school back again. And the judge was also seeing that how this educational process was extremely important for the student, and that the decisions that he makes sometimes, that how he has to further align himself with some restorative practices that are more meaningful for these kids. So there was no conversation around all that stuff all the theory of this thing, how important it is that we do things this way. It was an example for me in terms of learning how they had selected these members to be in this particular group that was trying to meet continuously at least 5-6 times a year. So I was just thinking, how good is this kind of communication with each other? I mean, they was talking about, okay, my dropout prevention specialist is going to, really bring in this work for this kid. And this was such a great exchange of ideas and how they can streamline these processes. So I just thought I would share this with you because it was an eye-opener for me that these things can work if we are intentional and deliberate about how we structure this. And then they were all very happy. They were feeling like, oh, we are not isolated. We're actually caring about our community. It's an issue of our community, not necessarily an issue of detention or school or family of that sort. And they were building toward their own community. People felt more satisfied. They were appearing to be more happy. I hear that they retained their staff members when I see there's a lot of turnover around them, and enjoy that satisfaction and efficiency in their environment. So I think that this gives us an idea about why we actually need to collaborate, because we're all dealing with complexity of issues, and those different perspectives really help us understand the depth of this. Now I want to take us to the classroom setting. What is actually happening in our classrooms? We come from the time, at least myself, and I know many of my colleagues here, when we had general education, special education, resource setting, self-contained, some inclusion, LRE placements and so forth. So I just want us to sort of see and kind of think about this pandemic year as well, how things have recently changed. We're noticing that most educators are now supporting students who have gone through some kind of a traumatic experience. Some of them have disabilities. Some of them have experienced family death. Some of them have experienced some kind of food insecurities. Some of them have housing concerns. Some of them are actually experiencing relationship issues in their families. So there are a lot of things that we're dealing with in our classrooms. We are also becoming more aware of the fact that in this recent year, many of our students had to move from face-to-face to an online and hybrid environment. So the environment of learning has changed for most everybody in our schools in this recent past. Now we are so technology driven, right? We need to be having access to technology, and technology is more like a utility. It's like electricity, it's like power, it's like water. It's almost very essential if we want to survive in this environment. So the context is, again, adding to the complexity of this experience that we are having as teachers. So when we have such varied needs around us, and oftentimes when I hear the principals or assistant principals, not all of them, but that we need to really provide them with a similar experience, or that push actually reaches to the level of a common experience to all. I get worried. I feel that we have so many varied needs around us, and this common approach to dealing with every student need can become problematic. So what does that look like? That means that we are not then able to think about individualization. That means we are not able to differentiate because this pressure of common thing is on me. Maybe we're not even engaging in some innovative ideas. We're not becoming creative in coming up with solutions for these new problems that we are encountering. So we're not able to take some balanced risk, which is the fun part of having these safe spaces, collaborative structures where we can discuss these ideas. So then we have to question, are we really falling into some type of a collaborative structure that is stifling our thinking, which is stopping us from being more innovative or creative? Or is it really helping us develop some kind of collective wisdom that we can come up with solutions? So we really need to understand that there is some intention here. We want to come up with some solutions. So I would leave you with this idea that we would have to evaluate those structures that are in places for us. Are they allowing us to be creative about our ideas, allowing us to be, able to differentiate instruction across the needs of our students? As far as special ed is concerned, we have CEC standards, standard number 6 and standard number 7, that are specifically addressing professional learning and collaboration. So our programs, even though, initially, of course, I'm just going back historically, and we all have sort of sailed through the times where we were more categorical. We were so specialized, we understood, we had the time, we could do those kind of things. And then over time, we had this idea that it really doesn't matter if the kid is behind in reading. It doesn't matter whether they are labeled as having learning disabilities or if they are, referred to as being having emotional disabilities of some kind that are interfering with their reading comprehension. We just need to teach them the skill of reading comprehension. So in that, we sort of started to become more cross-categorical, right? Our focus was to teach the skill, not necessarily paying attention to what their labels were. And then in more recent years, we have become dual certification, which means that you are getting within the same time you are getting elementary education certificate and also special ed certificate. That's how, at least in our university, I see that part. And then it's more like an integrated preparation program, right? Everybody's sitting together, they're getting information on some of the stuff that pertains to elementary ed, and then also special ed. Or maybe secondary ed and special ed, however they want to pursue their journey. So what is happening is that we have sort of created a lot of expectations that they're going to do all these special ed standards that they need to know. They also need to be addressing their elementary ed, content related standards, and the expectation is also that they will be using high leverage practices, and collaboration happens to be a high leverage practice. And they would know multi-tiered systems of supports. They would know the Common Core standards, whichever states are actually still continuing with those. So there is a lot that is expected. Those are our standards and expectations that we have in our programs. So as I mentioned, and collaboration happens to be one of the high leverage practice, and it is there, that we need to learn how to deal with other professionals, that we need to be able to work with families and collaborate with families and so forth. And these high leverage practices were identified and developed by, you have heard the name CEDAR and their collaboration with CEC, and they were organized around 4 different domains of teaching practice, collaboration being one of the domains, assessment being the second one, social, emotional, and behavioral being the third one, and instruction being the fourth one. So how are we getting into this? And I'm just laying out this groundwork of the expectations and standards for a person who tries to make a decision about teaching. That means that if they are getting into these structures of learning, that they should also know how to initiate, their process of learning. They should know how to seek information about that they should be able to provide information about themselves, should have, the ability to clarify things and so forth. So that those kind of skills are needed in that collaborative structure to gain information about things. So if they're going to be using high leverage practice of collaboration, it's important that they know how to initiate a conversation or communication, that they know how to seek information, that they are able to even provide some additional information. They know how to clarify things, when there is a need for that they also know how to come together. Because remember, there is something called that area, the zone, grown zone, where you come from different perspectives and there's an impasse situation that happens. So consensus building, and then comes to this solution part. So those are the high leverage, different kinds of skills that we need to develop in order for us to use this collaboration as a high leverage practice in our professional journey. So, and where do we see this would be actually used? So we got this thing, we have a lot of standards, expectations, and now there is this placement of this particular skill that seems to be so important in a high leverage practice. Then we need to have, we need to be able to collect and interpret some assessment data. Remember progress monitoring that happens, that's where you see collaborative structures coming together, discussing that data, evaluating that situation, coming up with the idea of how to plan instruction that is relevant. Maybe all third graders come together, talk about that this is how I'm going to align my curriculum. I'm going to be teaching this the first 2 weeks, and then following this, these are my lesson plans, and that's how I'm going to be doing this. You talk to your peers that you're consistently meeting with, some key content, about some key content and skills that you think your kids with specific needs, special needs, or English language learning needs, or you do that part. And then you also talk about sometimes how you reflect on, how responsive your instruction has been, whether or not students are learning, or what kind of things you're noticing with regard to their knowledge base and learning in these environments, and what kind of changes would you like to make, with these discussions that you have. So these are some areas where we think that collaboration seems to be helpful in terms of having these kind of conversation. We're trying to look at the assessment part, the instructional part, the curriculum part, the responsivity of instruction, and changes that you want to bring to that instruction. But it, even though it appears to be, really cool that this is so good that we can do these things, we have also noted some barriers, in this process. When people come from different epistemological backgrounds, they can't agree. So this time that has been designated for these collaborative structures seems to be all gone because we can't agree on things. When there is poor coordination between teachers, special education, general education, the schedules are not matching. It's just, bad timing. There is no time for planning. And then, like I mentioned, some initial skills that you need to have for being a collaborative person, whether you can initiate some kind of communication, deliver information, those kind of things. And sometimes we have seen that collaboration becomes very informal. It just turns into a conversational group. it doesn't get into the much deeper levels of involvement, which is like, let's make instructional decisions, let's make some decisions about changes in things that we are more reflective in that sense, or creating some problem solving kind of things within that group, or discover some new facts about what is happening, you know, trying to ascertain the extent of the problem or generating some solutions to that issue. So it just remains very sort of like, let's just, you know, simple conversation about that, which is not bad because that starts off that, but at some point needs to be serving the purpose for which we have come together in this group. So then this collaborative structure has to result in some level of professional learning, right? It's not like having dinner together, or it's not like it's so informal that we're talking. Those are important, you know, you create that third, those are important things, but here we're talking about being intentional and deliberate about something that we want to address, and you know, that it's carefully coordinated, and there is some cycle of learning here. We're engaging in some inquiry for something that is important, and we're generating new knowledge and trying to see whether we can apply that, and what happens when we apply them. And this, you know, it is outcome based and reflective. There is some accountability in this process. It's systemic, it's coordinated, it's ongoing, it's result oriented, and then reflective and evaluative. So that's where you're actually becoming part of this collaborative structure of professional learning team, where you're generating these kind of decisions and following those different elements within the process. So what is making us feel like that, you know, this is an important concept? Because we think that, you know, there are different frameworks that are helping us understand why this seems to be working. We are all social beings. We learn in communities, and we feel like, oh, sometimes that kind of learning happens so effortlessly. You know, when we're with people, we're learning those kind of things. Everybody's doing that part. You feel more safe. You can take some risk. You can learn from each other. You're also learning through observation, Bandura's, you know, thing. You're watching teachers do things, and so you're able to follow what they're doing. And you're actually learning in the context of learning. You're not, it's not like learning the course in the institution of higher ed issue and then going to the classrooms, and then you have to apply that, take it with you, remember what you were asked to do. You're in it, you're seeing it, and you're doing it. So all that has been streamlined, and it becomes really, really easy to see that and do it. So it's, you know, a lot of social learning, a lot of observational learning, and learning in the context of learning happens here. So that's why it seems to us that it's an important piece of learning, especially for us as adults. It's really helpful. So, and I brought to your attention some of the aspects of teacher development and teacher preparation. Despite all these mechanisms that we have, all these expectation standards that we have, that we're trying to align, and the changes that we have sort of gone through with regard to the expectations, from being categorical to cross-categorical to then being dual to a being, you know, integrated approach of learning and all that, we are finding that there is a lot of teacher burnout. I know Bev and I worked with other colleagues and had a recent paper 2 or 3 years ago about how some teachers were feeling this burnout and did not have the coping mechanisms to deal with that, and then didn't feel like, and we also found that professional development and professional learning was one of their ways to cope. So that was coming out loud and clear, that when they have mechanisms of this sort where they could align themselves with other colleagues, you know, for professional learning opportunities, they seem to be staying with this profession. So a lot of turnover we have noticed. We have also seen different ways of preparing teachers. Broad certification and licensure provisions are there. Teachers are not getting practice-based opportunities, in their preparation programs. And particularly last year or so, how it was with all these hybrid online kind of opportunities, how these field experiences were sort of confined in many ways. So things are, they've changed. And so we are actually recruiting teachers who are unprepared. I mean, we don't have to apologize for this is the reality. This is what is happening. And we see that that's a problem. So lot of variance in this teacher development and preparation. We have done a lot of things, to reduce this variance by sometimes adding the additional requirements of licensure exams. Sometimes we've had some very good induction programs that have helped teachers pick up their skills. Sometimes they have really worked well. But, teachers who are finding themselves not so well prepared, they could have benefited from these kind of supports, but sometimes they got frustrated and left the field before even they had time to develop. And that is happening as well. So one thing we have to ask when we're actually redesigning our programs, and we are under these pressures that it has to be a dual cert program, then we have to ask this question: are we really creating an oversimplified, mechanistic representation of good teaching? Are we really thinking that by making this dual program where we think it's collaborative and we have students, teacher candidates coming from both areas of elementary pathways and special ed pathways coming together, taking these classes, are we seeing collaboration as a moral obligation? Or are we really using these learning opportunities and structures to improve our programs and competencies? There is that intentional aspect that we all need to address. We have to become self-reflective. We just cannot have this idea that sounds good. And in those collaborative structures, we tend to appreciate those ideas. We praise them, but we neglect to look at the constructive feedback that sometimes we receive. There is a difference in being praised and receiving feedback, and both are extremely important. So we have to ask those kind of questions when we are in these collaborative structures, whether we are utilizing them for deeper level of changes that are needed in our profession. Because sometimes we find that people, when they are in these groups, they worry about sharing an idea. Sometimes they don't even talk. They feel like, oh, maybe I'm creating some kind of a conflict. Maybe I shouldn't say that now. And the reason is that they don't want to be viewed as that he or she's not a team player. So a lot happens in these decision-making processes. I mean, what I'm trying to say is this: all this is good. We have research, we have good frameworks, we have standards, we have expectations, we have history. But these things still happen, and we need to be aware of those, and we have to ask these questions of ourselves as we are moving forward in our field, how we are utilizing this mechanism. So we know that research on professional learning has indicated that it is really effective when it incorporates active learning. when it's content-based, when it really focuses upon multiple models of a specific problem, how do you solve it, what you do, kind of thing, not just one way of doing it. When it includes coaching and expert support, when there is constructive feedback and reflection, and there is continuity of this experience. So it's extremely important to understand that it's not a one-shot thing. And it has to result in that continuous process of learning, which is ongoing. And there is that level of commitment to that. In more recent years, we have seen some research, that targeted coaching was very good. It really helped. And when we were able to provide feedback to the teachers, they actually increased their use of behavior-specific praise. And this research that I'm talking about is actually coming from the multi-tiered systems and supports research. They tend to have coaching as part of training, and then they use that and see how it actually helps teachers develop their own competencies in those areas. They also studied about coaching and email performance feedback, and then saw that there was a change in their positive to negative feedback and behavior-specific praise in classroom. There is also research that indicates a relationship between teacher collaboration and their satisfaction. And Linda Darling, Hammond, and that group had done some recent review in 2017, not very recent, 35 studies, and they found, based on that analysis, that student achievement is positively associated with effective co-teaching structures and collaborative structures. So when collaboration has the opportunities for planning, teaching, and evaluation, we have seen that the effect size is pretty high. There was some mention about 0.93, which was very appealing. But we still have a long way to go. We need to do more research on effective collaborative structures. We need to develop a better understanding of how this, the dynamics of collaboration unfolds and affects learning. We need to find that. We also should be more clear on measuring the coordination parts. How many times, how long, how many meetings, whether it is content-based, all those kind of things need to be there. And we need to be able to measure teacher knowledge and changes in practice that have resulted from collaborative learning. We should be able to measure that. And to date, there have been these efforts, but I think we can benefit from large-scale systematic evidence, with some large-scale studies that would create that kind of evidence of how these collaborative experiences enhance teacher development. So we have some needs here. Personally, I find that I am still, using collaboration in my online teaching. I use Google Drive and those kind of documents where students can come together and generate their discussion, and in time I can see them working at the same time as well. They collaborated, on the same document or presentation. And I have also used blogging sometimes, where they could collaborate on writing posts together and then share to build upon learning. In my face-to-face classes, I have utilized project-based learning, where there are roles of each of these students, in where they come together, explore some of their problems of practice, and come up with a working solution with their peers. Hands-on activities, I use them for generating innovative ideas that are then staying away from the worksheet or a textbook kind of an activity. But they generate, new ideas. They take risk with that information, develop some of those kind of things. We also work with a wall of discussion, where students can post their ideas, and we go back and see different kind of ideas that have been generated in that collaborative space. So even in my research and grants, I have collaborated with a lot of people, and writing articles. I could have never done this alone. So I just want us to know that this is an important skill to have. And you have to develop that for your own professional identity. It's very important. And now that, we are becoming more of a, global in our approaches in terms of trying to understand what is happening in our international space, collaboration has become even more important. And for developing meaningful cultural connections, I have noticed that this particular skill really helps in developing those connections and trying to understand the perspective of other people and so forth. It fosters more interaction, mutual respect, understanding of various experiences and perspectives of different, people from different backgrounds. I recently had the opportunity of working with a faculty member from Australia where we jointly taught a course, which was an extremely satisfying experience. So what is the conclusion of this whole thing? That these are great tools for building our own capacity, our own knowledge, skills. It reduces isolation. It increases our ability to become a caring, productive educator, and offers us the opportunity of providing quality experiences to our students. But we still need to know more about the factors and conditions that create improved collaboration and professional learning. Thank you. Questions or comments or anything that I said was like, oh, it doesn't make sense, or maybe can you clarify this?
Sarup, I have one. If you can elaborate, because one of the points you made early on, which I think was a very important one, which was that organizations need to create space, if you will, so that people have safe places to share their identity. So give us a few helpful hints on how within our school structure or our organizational structure, how can we go about ensuring that people have safe places to share their identity?
That's a great question, and we are still working toward that. We have started to have a collaborative structure where we come together, and we have created a process where we have time. We have a time limit on, because we have identified within the group, okay, tell us what are some of your pet peeves. And so other colleagues would say, I am a talker. So then we kind of generate this discussion about, so what do we need to have, in this space so that we would give opportunity to everybody. Now, we also have another colleague of ours who would say, I don't like to talk. It's more of an internalizing situation with that colleague. So we give them an opportunity. Would you like to do pair share? Instead of, because you don't want to create another shutdown syndrome for a person who has internalizing issue because they are disclosing some of their own, conditions where they want to seek some help, and they become, because we create this, first we say that, this is a safe space. You're not being evaluated. There is nothing going to be out of this room. And so let us discuss this part and have some opportunity to talk about some of the things that we're talking. This was actually done for a redesign process of a course. So, but we had to know each other, because I didn't even know the persons who were assigned to teaching these courses. We had several sections of that. And so we had to create this kind of a climate first. And for me, it was like, if you would ask me to do something, I will do it. Sometimes I'm not very, I just cannot generate that kind of conversation that's ongoing. So I have to sort of pause between the conversation and then give my ideas. So we talked about that and gave space to everybody and valued everybody's input, and we became respectful of their demeanors and their dispositions, and then every idea was welcomed.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now we are at, thank you so much, Dr. Sarup. You have shown us how much more research we need to be doing in this area. Like you've opened up the different ways in which we are indeed maybe learning at the kind of like how to formalize and to proceed with safe spaces, for example, and how to really be attentive and tuned in to the context and to the people in the context. So there's a great need for self-awareness, and I think Beverly has another question in the chat box related to this.
Let me see if I can.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, here's an excellent. What happens when a colleague is uncooperative to collaborative efforts?
Yep, it happens, right? It's like we have wasted some time, so many, meetings in the beginning when we have one person either not cooperating in that direction or capitalizing on discussions, or those kind of things do happen. I think what needs to happen is when you're setting up structures of this kind, there are some rules that we have to lay out. There has to be a list of things that these are some of the rules of this particular collaborative group, and this is what we are going to adhere to. And you can offer that opportunity. People can volunteer themselves to be a non-participant in that. Instead of stifling other people's discussions, we can give that opportunity for, we do have a space here where sometimes it's not so great to be participating in everything, and it's fine. We can, give that opportunity. And if we can set it up in a way that these are some of the things that we have experienced in our previous group processing opportunities, where people have sometimes come across being uncooperative or having very, not sharing ideas or not listening to the other ideas. And you have to set it up in your expectation that that is not acceptable in this group. So set up some of the rules way ahead of time before you get involved in that. I wouldn't assume that since we all are coming from some professional backgrounds that we don't need to hear those rules the very first time. I think when you're starting off with a group, you should have those rules. And if you have the opportunity to be selective about and deliberate about the membership of the group, that would also not be a bad idea. Sometimes you have to find people and target them for that group to better, to progress in that direction instead of getting stifled. Because I don't think we have time to be stifling our efforts, do we? I mean, we have so much to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they can find other spaces. Maybe they are better in offering their expertise in some other ways. We're not saying that you're not welcome, but we're setting up some rules for this particular group.
Well, thank you so very, very much, Dr. Mathur. we are really enjoying thinking about our field and about the 100 years of the Council for Exceptional Children, and about how Elizabeth Farrell, by some extraordinary strength, she got the collaboration of all kinds of people when there was no internet and there was no email, and now we have new tools to do it. And it's an amazing time to think about, and of course we have a pandemic. It's an amazing time. So anybody, Bev, is there anything else in the chat or anything else that we should address?
So many positive comments. And someone did say in small groups, sometimes it can be difficult. Several people said they took lots and lots of notes. It was well done, well done.
Thank you so much. And I know that I see that it's a challenging road. It's not easy. But I think special educators are in a better place because they were trained to be collaborators. That's how team-based approach, doing multidisciplinary teams for the IEP, the talking to parents. I mean, it was part of our professional growth, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Very true, very true.
Well, thank you, everybody. We have amazing people in our group here this morning doing extraordinary work, Dr. Mathur, doing collaboration every day and in different languages. Isn't that extraordinary when you think about collaboration? In English is one big challenge all by itself, but then throw in, multilingual groups, extraordinary work. So we could go on for another hour talking about some of the things our participants are doing every day. So with all of that, our time has come to an end. And are there any closing comments?
I just want us all to remember that we're still learning, right? Mm-hmm. And our commitment to learning. I think that's what I would like to say.
We are still learning and we are committed to learning. And we thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your precious Saturday morning with us. Thank you to everybody. And we look forward to seeing you next month. We have a wonderful presentation again on collaboration with Dr. Our dear colleague in North Carolina, Marilyn Friend, who has spent her wonderful professional career working on this as well. So please join us again next month, and we look forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.